I'm Julia Manchester. Welcome to What's America Thinking, where we'll be focusing on what you, the American people, really think and feel about the biggest issues facing this country. Are you fed up with the government and its inability to make your lives better? Does Washington even really understand your struggles? Join us each week as we dive into all of these questions and take on the disconnect between D.C. and the people. We're kicking things off with your number one concern heading into this election year, the economy.
Housing is an absolute key issue. I work with young people all the time. They can't afford to live in a lot of the cities anymore. They're feeling like they'll never be able to buy a house.
I couldn't believe that a burrito costs $16. I mean, the last time I was in Chicago, it was like 12, and now it's 16. I can't imagine actually actively living there.
As a teacher and as a mom, and seeing how challenged our young people are by their horrific debt in terms of their education and trying to get their lives off the ground. Yeah, I think it should be an issue. It should be made an issue if it is not an issue.
I think it's like coffee is like so much more expensive. Things like that used to be like $3 to $4 or like $9 to $10. And it's just like, it's like a drastic shift.
But it's never as simple as it seems. Is the economy booming or is it a bust? It just depends on who you ask.
Everybody's doing better, and they believe it. They know it.
Our country's going to hell. You don't mind me using that horrible word, don't you?
All good. Take a look. Start reporting it the right way.
When there's a crash, I hope it's going to be during this next 12 months, because I don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
Since I took office, my Investing in America agenda has led to manufacturing boom that's attracted over $600 billion.
It's time to wake up, Washington. Here to dive into what's really happening on the economic front is Chief Economist at the Economic Innovation Group, Adam Ozimek. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. A recent poll from the AP shows 76% of people say their biggest economic concern is the economy, trailing far behind our foreign policy, politics, and immigration. Does that surprise you?
No, this is consistent with what other polls have showed. It's pretty consistent with a variety of data sources. They're not happy with the state of the economy right now. So it's not surprising in that sense. It's not breaking news. We know that people are upset with the economy, but it's surprising in the sense that the state of the economy is actually pretty good right now. Unemployment's low. Inflation has come back down substantially. It's not quite back to normal, but it's getting close to it. And real wages are going up. So, historically speaking, the economy is pretty good. So in that sense, there is a little bit of a surprise to the unhappiness that people are feeling. But the way to reconcile this is that it's been a rocky path to this economy.
Yeah, I know that there's definitely a disconnect there, and that's confusing for a lot of voters. But we talked to Americans this week who say they're getting a lot of mixed messages. If you listen to Biden, the economy's doing great. But if you listen to Trump, we're doomed. So which is it?
Well, let's start by adjusting both of their rhetoric a little bit. If we reel one side in, reel the other. So not everyone's doing good, and not everyone's doing bad. I think the truth lies somewhere in between the two of them, in the sense that the economy is in objectively good shape right now. It's a good time to find a job. Inflation is under control. But the critical way to look at this, the thing that's closer to what Donald Trump said, is that it's been a tough path to get the economy where it is now. We had really high levels of inflation. We had a lot of chaos in the economy. It was hard to find certain goods, and it was not a great path here. And so I think you can recognize the way that the economy is pretty good. But it's been a rough path to here, and it's okay. It's okay for people to be upset about that.
A recent CBS News poll shows that 76% of people said their income isn't keeping up with inflation. That's a huge number. Is this an accurate representation, and where do you see that number going from here?
It's a tricky one, because you have to ask kind of compared to what. Like if you look at the average growth rate in incomes before the pandemic, we're falling short of that a little bit. for a while, real wages were falling as inflation was growing faster than wage growth. But then within the last 6 months to a year, real wages have been outpacing or have been positive as wage growth has outpaced inflation. So are wages up compared to before the pandemic? Yes. But are they disappointing for many people? How much progress we've seen? Yes, that's also true.
Yeah, I've got another comparison and polling question for you on that note. Another CBS poll compared young Americans' standard of living to that of their parents. 46% said their standard of living is worse today than their parents. Is there any hope in sight for young Americans right now?
Well, there's always things to complain about. There's many things that young Americans can complain about that are legitimate problems with the economy, cost of housing being one of them. But there's no sense in which the standard of living today is worse than it was for young people worse than it was for their parents. There absolutely has been progress. I think what matters, though, is that we've seen less progress than the previous generation had. So, young kids today, their parents could look back at the generation before them and say, wow, we've come so far since then, compared to the World War II generation, the amount of incredible economic progress that the baby boom generation saw. And now millennials look back and they say, well, we've seen some progress, but not as much. So I think we have to be realistic. Things are better now. The standard of living is higher. There are a lot of goods and services we have now that we didn't have then. Average incomes are higher, but it would be better if we were seeing progress accumulate faster.
So do you remember the movie Home Alone with Macaulay Culkin? There's this TikTok trend going around where people are adding up Kevin's grocery list. You see Macaulay Culkin there as Kevin now. What would it cost? See what it would cost today. They're claiming a 248% increase. Has inflation really gone up that much?
Now I have to be the unfun economist who fact checks the TikTok videos, who says that the meme is not quite right. It's fun, right? It's an interesting exercise. Let's look at some handful of things and see how much prices have gone up. But it's not the way they did it. So Chris Clark, an economist, did an interesting analysis of this meme, and there are a lot of apples to oranges comparisons. So, for example, Macaulay Culkin in his basket had 4 rolls of toilet paper, and they compared the price to 6 rolls of toilet paper. He had a box of 20 dryer sheets, and they compared the price to a box of like 200 dryer sheets today. So there's a lot of ways in which you have to be very careful that you're comparing a good of the exact same size to a good of the same size today. Otherwise, you can make it look like prices went up more than they did or less than they did. If you really do a kind of apples to apples comparison, you control for how much bigger the container of laundry detergent is and all these fun things. Prices have gone up, but it's closer to like 114%, something like that. So that's not great. I mean, if what you're concerned about is simply our prices going up, but the reality is that wage growth over this time has gone up 170%. So what we want is wages to be going up faster than prices. And if the Fed wanted to, they could just crank up interest rates and get inflation to zero, but that would mean lower real wage growth over the long term. There's a lot of unanticipated or unintended negative consequences when you try to turn inflation to zero.
Right. Context is always very important. Chief Economist Adam Ozimek, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
More What's America Thinking coming up.